The lightning struck so close that Marcus felt the heat sear across his face, and that's when he saw him. A man in an expensive suit lying face down in the mud, blood pooling beneath his silver hair, 50 yards from an overturned Mercedes that was already being swallowed by flames. Marcus Chen had exactly $47 in his bank account when he decided to check the North Field during the worst storm Millbrook County had seen in 30 years. His wife Sarah had begged him not to go. "The fences can wait," she pleaded, her hand resting protectively over her swollen belly, 7 months pregnant with their first child.
"Please, Marcus. It's not safe." But Marcus knew better. The north fence bordered the highway, and if it came down, their last 3 cows would wander onto Route 47. They couldn't afford to lose those animals. They couldn't afford to lose anything. So he'd kissed Sarah's forehead, pulled on his father's old rain slicker, the one with the torn pocket and missing buttons, and headed out into the teeth of the storm. The rain came down in sheets so thick he could barely see 5 feet ahead. The wind howled like a wounded animal, bending the old oak trees along the property line until Marcus feared they'd snap. His boots squelched through mud that tried to suck them off with every step. He was halfway to the north fence when the lightning strike happened. The flash was so bright it burned white spots into his vision. The thunder followed instantly, no delay, meaning the strike was practically on top of him. Marcus dove instinctively to the ground, his heart hammering against his ribs. That's when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. A grinding, scraping sound of metal on asphalt, followed by the unmistakable crash of a vehicle leaving the road. Then came the explosion, a deep, resonating boom that Marcus felt in his chest. He scrambled to his feet, rain streaming down his face, and ran toward the highway. The scene that greeted him looked like something from a disaster movie. A black Mercedes SUV lay upside down in the drainage ditch, flames already licking up from the engine compartment. The vehicle must have hydroplaned on the flooded road, flipped multiple times, and crashed through the fence Marcus had been coming to check. And there, sprawled in the mud 50 yards from the burning wreckage, was a man. Marcus didn't think.
Didn't hesitate. He ran.
The man was older, maybe 60, with silver hair now matted with mud and blood. He wore what had once been an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, now torn and soaked. Even unconscious and dying, there was something commanding about him, something that spoke of power and money, things Marcus Chen knew nothing about.
"Sir.
Sir, can you hear me?" Marcus dropped to his knees in the mud, his hands shaking as he checked for a pulse. They're weak, thready, but there. The man was alive. A quick assessment showed a deep gash on the side of the man's head, bleeding profusely. His left arm was bent at an unnatural angle, definitely broken. And the way he was breathing, shallow and labored, suggested possible internal injuries. Behind them, the Mercedes exploded again, the flames now consuming the entire vehicle. The heat washed over Marcus even from this distance. He couldn't move the man. Not with those injuries. But he couldn't leave him here either, not in the storm, not with that head wound bleeding so badly. Marcus shrugged out of his rain slicker and pressed it against the head wound, applying pressure. With his free hand, he fumbled for his phone. No signal. Of course not. The storm had probably knocked out the cell tower on Miller's Ridge. "Hold on," Marcus whispered, though he didn't know if the man could hear him. "Just hold on." He stayed there for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, keeping pressure on the wound, shielding the unconscious man from the worst of the rain with his own body. Marcus was soaked to the skin, shivering, but he didn't move. Finally, he heard sirens in the distance. Someone must have seen the explosion from the road. Thank God. The paramedics arrived first, followed quickly by Sheriff Morrison's patrol car. Marcus moved back, letting the professionals work, watching as they stabilized the man and loaded him onto a stretcher. "You saved his life," one of the paramedics told Marcus as they prepared to transport. She was young, couldn't have been more than 25, but her eyes were serious. He'd have bled out in another 10 minutes. Maybe less. "Is he going to make it?" Marcus asked. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But he's got a fighting chance now. Thanks to you." Sheriff Morrison took Marcus's statement, basic facts, nothing complicated. A car crash during the storm. Marcus happened to be nearby. He'd helped until emergency services arrived. "You know who that is?" Morrison asked, nodding toward the ambulance. Marcus shook his head. "That's Richard Ashford," Morrison said, and he seemed to be waiting for a reaction. The name meant nothing to Marcus. He shrugged. Morrison's eyebrows rose. "Richard Ashford? Owns Ashford Industries? Half the commercial real estate in this county belongs to him. Hell, half the county belongs to him, period." Marcus looked at the ambulance, where paramedics were loading the stretcher. Never heard of him. Well, Morrison said, he's heard of you now. Or he will when he wakes up. If he wakes up. The ambulance pulled away, lights flashing, disappearing into the storm. Marcus walked home in the rain, shivering, exhausted. The storm was finally starting to break, the worst of it moving east. By the time he reached the farmhouse, it had diminished to a steady drizzle. Sarah was waiting on the porch, wrapped in her grandmother's quilt. The moment she saw him, she burst into tears. "I thought something happened to you," she sobbed, and Marcus pulled her into his arms, careful of her belly. "I'm okay," he murmured. "I'm okay. But we need to replace the north fence. It's completely down." He didn't tell her about Richard Ashford. Didn't tell her about the crash or the blood or the way the Mercedes had burned. She was 7 months pregnant and didn't need the stress. That night, Marcus lay awake listening to Sarah's soft breathing beside him. He kept seeing that man's face, unconscious, vulnerable, human despite the expensive suit and the power Sheriff Morrison had talked about. Marcus had saved a life tonight. That was all that mattered. He didn't expect anything to come of it. Didn't expect thanks or recognition or reward. People like Richard Ashford lived in a different world than people like Marcus Chen. Their paths had crossed by pure chance, by accident and storm and bad luck. By morning, Marcus had put the whole thing out of his mind. He had a fence to repair and cows to feed and a baby coming in 2 months. He had real life to deal with. He had no idea that his real life was about to change forever. 3 days passed. Marcus spent them doing what he always did, working the farm from dawn to dusk, trying to coax a living from soil that seemed determined to give him nothing but trouble. The north fence took a full day to repair. One of the cows had mastitis and needed medication they couldn't really afford. The tractor made a grinding sound that suggested expensive repairs in the near future. This was Marcus's life, and he'd accepted it long ago. He'd grown up on this farm, his grandfather's farm originally, then his father's, now his. The Chen family had been farming this land for 3 generations, always barely scraping by, always one bad season away from losing everything. Marcus had dreams once. College, maybe. Engineering degree. A different kind of life. But his father had died when Marcus was 19, leaving him with the farm and his grieving mother and debt that seemed to compound faster than he could pay it down. His mother had passed 2 years later. And then there was just Marcus, alone with 300 acres of stubborn land and a mortgage that felt like a noose around his neck. Then he'd met Sarah at the county fair 5 years ago, and she'd somehow seen something in him worth loving. They'd married in a small ceremony at the town church. She'd moved into the farmhouse and never once complained about the leaky roof or the temperamental water heater or the fact that they had to watch every penny. Now they were having a baby, and Marcus lay awake at night wondering how he was going to afford diapers and formula and all the things a child needed. On the 4th day after the storm, a black town car pulled up the dirt road to the farmhouse. Marcus was in the barn, mucking out stalls, a job that was as unglamorous as farming got. He heard the car before he saw it, the purr of an expensive engine completely out of place in this setting. He walked out of the barn, pitchfork still in hand, and stopped. The town car was sleek and polished, probably cost more than Marcus made in 5 years. The driver's door opened, and a man in a dark suit stepped out, not Richard Ashford, but someone who radiated the same kind of quiet authority. "Marcus Chen?" the man asked. "That's me. My name is James Whitmore. I'm the attorney for Richard Ashford." He paused. "I believe you saved Mr. Ashford's life 4 days ago." Marcus set down the pitchfork. "Is he okay?" "I haven't heard anything." "He's recovering. He woke up yesterday. The doctors say he'll make a full recovery, thanks to your quick thinking and intervention." Whitmore's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Ashford asked me to come here personally to express his gratitude." "That's not necessary," Marcus said. "Anyone would have done the same thing." "Perhaps. But you were the one who did it." Whitmore reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Mr. Ashford wanted you to have this." Marcus took the envelope cautiously. Inside was a check. He looked at the amount and felt his knees go weak. $50,000. "I can't accept this," Marcus said immediately, trying to hand it back. "It's too much. I didn't help him for money. I helped him because he needed help." "Mr. Ashford knows that," Whitmore said, making no move to take the check back. "That's precisely why he wants you to have it. He's a good judge of character, Mr. Chen. He told me to make sure you understood, this isn't payment. This is gratitude from one human being to another." Marcus stared at the check. $50,000. It would pay off the mortgage. Fix the tractor. Cover medical bills for the baby. Give them breathing room for the first time in years. But it felt wrong. Like accepting charity. Mr. Ashford also wanted me to tell you something, Whitmore continued. He said to tell you that you gave him his life back. His daughter is getting married next spring. His grandson just started kindergarten. Because of you, he'll be there for those moments. He said no amount of money could repay that, but he hopes this helps. Marcus's throat tightened. When Whitmore put it that way, when he made it about family, about moments and memories, it became harder to refuse. There's one more thing, Whitmore said. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Marcus. Mr. Ashford asked me to tell you that if you ever need anything, and he meant anything, you're to call him directly. Day or night. He considers himself in your debt. Marcus looked at the card. It was simple, elegant. Richard Ashford, CEO, Ashford Industries, with a phone number embossed in gold. I don't understand, Marcus said slowly. Why would someone like him care about someone like me? Whitmore smiled, a real smile, not the professional one he'd been wearing. Mr. Ashford built his company from nothing, Mr. Chen. His father was a construction worker. His mother cleaned houses. He understands exactly what it's like to struggle. And he never forgets the people who help him, regardless of their circumstances. After Whitmore left, Marcus stood in the yard for a long time, holding the check and the business card. Sarah came out of the house, moving slowly, one hand on her lower back. Who was that? Marcus showed her the check. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Marcus, is that real? It's real. And then she was crying and laughing at the same time, and Marcus was holding her, and for the first time in years, he felt something that had been missing from his life. Hope. The shocking twist. What Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that the business card in his pocket represented more than just a wealthy man's gratitude. In Richard Ashford's office downtown, the man himself sat behind his massive desk, his head still bandaged, his arm in a cast. Across from him sat his daughter Victoria and his trusted CFO, Robert Hammond. You're sure about this? Victoria asked, concern evident in her voice. You don't know anything about this man. He's a farmer, Dad. He probably saved you hoping for exactly this kind of payoff. He tried to refuse the check, Richard said quietly. When Whitmore offered it to him, his first instinct was to give it back. Does that sound like someone looking for a payoff? Everyone has a price, Hammond interjected. Yes, Richard agreed. And this young man's price was simple human decency. Do you know what he said to the paramedics? Is he going to make it? Not who is he or is there a reward? He wanted to know if a complete stranger was going to survive. Richard leaned back carefully in his chair. I've built my fortune by reading people, Victoria. Marcus Chen is genuine. Rare. The kind of man I want in my life. So what are you planning? Victoria asked, though from her tone, she suspected she already knew. Richard smiled, the kind of smile that had built an empire. I'm planning to give him an opportunity. A real one. But first, I need to watch him. See what he does with that 50,000. See what kind of man he really is when money isn't so desperate. And if he passes your test? Hammond asked. Then Marcus Chen is going to discover that saving my life was the best decision he ever made. Chapter 1 End. The $50,000 sat in Marcus and Sarah's bank account for 3 days before Marcus could bring himself to spend any of it. It felt surreal, like a dream he might wake up from at any moment. But the money was real. And their needs were real. Sarah created a budget. She'd always been better with numbers than Marcus. They would pay off the mortgage first. That was essential. Then set aside money for the baby. Fix the tractor. Make some critical repairs to the farmhouse that they'd been putting off for years. We should save some, Sarah insisted. Put it away for emergencies. We can't just spend it all. Marcus agreed. They ended up putting $15,000 into a savings account they swore not to touch except for true emergencies. The rest they spent carefully, thoughtfully, on things they genuinely needed. And for the first time in his adult life, Marcus Chen went to sleep not worrying about money. He had no idea he was being watched. Had no idea that Richard Ashford had people quietly monitoring how he used the gift, what it said about his character. He had no idea that his simple act of human decency on a stormy night had set in motion events that would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone in Millbrook County. The story was just beginning. When Marcus opened the door 6 weeks after depositing that check, he expected maybe a deliveryman or a neighbor,
Not Richard Ashford himself standing on his porch in jeans and a casual button-down, looking nothing like the bloodied stranger from the storm and everything like someone who just decided to upend Marcus's entire world. The morning started like any other. Marcus woke at 5:30, just as the first gray light of dawn crept through the bedroom curtains. Sarah was already awake. At 8.5 months pregnant, sleep came in short, uncomfortable intervals. She was sitting up in bed, one hand on her belly, a small smile on her face. "He's kicking," she whispered. They'd found out 3 weeks ago they were having a boy. "I think he's going to be a soccer player." Marcus placed his hand next to hers, feeling the strong, rhythmic movements beneath her skin. Their son. Their child. The reality of it still took his breath away sometimes. "Or a fighter," Marcus said softly. "Tough like his mom." They'd used some of Richard Ashford's gift to turn the small spare room into a nursery. Nothing fancy, they'd painted it themselves, a soft blue that Sarah had picked out. Marcus had built the crib from a kit, following the instructions 3 times to make sure he got it right. Sarah's mother had sent a rocking chair that had been in their family for generations. It was simple, but it was theirs, and it was ready. After a quick breakfast, eggs from their own chickens, toast, coffee for Marcus and herbal tea for Sarah, Marcus headed out to start the day's work. The morning was crisp and clear, the kind of October day that made farming feel almost romantic instead of the hard, relentless work it actually was. The new tractor, well, new to them, a used John Deere they'd been able to afford thanks to the 50,000, started on the first try. Marcus spent the morning plowing the south field, preparing it for winter wheat. The work was meditative, rhythmic, giving him time to think. Life had gotten better in the 6 weeks since Richard Ashford's gift. Not dramatically different, they weren't suddenly wealthy. But the constant, grinding anxiety about money had eased. The mortgage was paid off. They had a small cushion in savings. When something broke, they could fix it without lying awake at night worrying about how to afford it. Marcus had called the number on Richard Ashford's business card once, about 2 weeks after receiving the check. Not to ask for anything, just to thank him properly. The conversation had been brief but warm. Ashford had sounded genuinely pleased to hear from him, had asked about Sarah and the baby, had told Marcus to please not hesitate to call if he ever needed anything. Marcus had no intention of calling again. The man had already given them more than enough. He finished plowing around noon and headed back to the house for lunch. Sarah had made sandwiches and was sitting at the kitchen table sorting through baby clothes that her sisters had sent. "Look at these," she said, holding up a tiny onesie with a cartoon elephant on it. "I can't believe something so small is going to fit a whole human being." They ate lunch together, talking about names they still hadn't decided on, about Sarah's upcoming doctor's appointment, about whether they should get a dog for the baby to grow up with. Normal life. Good life. The kind of life Marcus had always wanted but never quite believed he could have. At 2 o'clock, someone knocked on the door. Marcus answered it and froze. Richard Ashford stood on his porch. He looked completely different from the bloodied, unconscious man Marcus had found in the storm. His silver hair was neatly trimmed, his face tanned and healthy. He wore dark jeans, expensive but casual, and a blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He'd traded power suits for approachable comfort, but even in casual clothes, there was no mistaking the quiet authority in his bearing. "Mr. Chen," Ashford said, extending his hand. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Marcus shook his hand automatically, still processing. "Mr. Ashford." No, of course not. I wasn't expecting." "I should have called ahead," Ashford said. "That was rude of me. But I was in the area, and I wanted to thank you in person." "May I come in?" "Yes, of course." Marcus stepped back, acutely aware of how the farmhouse must look to someone like Richard Ashford. The worn linoleum in the kitchen. The old furniture that had been his parents'. The general shabbiness that no amount of cleaning could quite hide. But Ashford didn't seem to notice any of it. His attention was immediately on Sarah, who had appeared in the kitchen doorway, one hand protectively on her belly. "Mrs. Chen," Ashford said warmly. "It's a pleasure to meet you. And congratulations." He nodded to her belly. "When are you due?" 3 weeks, Sarah said, a bit breathlessly. She shot Marcus a look that clearly said, "Why is Richard Ashford in our kitchen?" "Please sit," Marcus said, gesturing to the kitchen table. "Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Water?" "Water would be wonderful, thank you." They settled around the kitchen table, Marcus and Sarah on one side, Ashford on the other. It felt surreal, like 2 different worlds colliding in the most unlikely way. "I wanted to come in person," Ashford began, "to thank you properly for what you did. My attorney told me you tried to refuse the check."
It was too much, Marcus said. I just did what anyone would do. That's where you're wrong, Ashford said quietly. Most people would have driven past that night. The storm was dangerous. You had your own problems, your own responsibilities. You could have died trying to help me. But you didn't hesitate. He paused. Do you know what the doctors told me? They said if you hadn't applied pressure to that head wound when you did, I would have bled out before the paramedics arrived. You saved my life, Marcus. And I don't take that lightly. The conversation drifted after that. Ashford was surprisingly easy to talk to. He asked about the farm, about their plans for the baby, about Sarah's family. He shared stories about his own daughter's pregnancy years ago, about the terror and joy of becoming a grandparent. Marcus found himself relaxing, almost forgetting who he was talking to. Ashford wasn't at all what he'd expected. There was no condescension, no sense that he thought himself above them. He was just a person. A kind, genuine person who happened to be extraordinarily wealthy. After about an hour, Ashford stood. I should let you both get back to your day. But before I go, I wanted to ask you something, Marcus. Of course. What are your plans? Long term, I mean. Do you plan to keep farming? It was an odd question, but Marcus answered honestly. I don't know. This farm has been in my family for 3 generations. I feel like I owe it to them to keep it going. But. He glanced at Sarah, then back at Ashford. Farming is hard. The margins are razor thin. One bad season and you're done. I don't know if it's the kind of stability I want for my son. Ashford nodded thoughtfully. Have you ever considered doing anything else? I wanted to be an engineer once, Marcus admitted. But my father died when I was 19, and I had to take over the farm. I never finished college. What kind of engineering? Civil engineering. I like the idea of building things, you know? Bridges, buildings, things that would last. Ashford was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he pulled out his phone and made a note. Would you mind if I asked you a few more questions? Not now, maybe over dinner sometime? My treat, of course. Marcus blinked. Dinner. I'm serious about staying in touch, Marcus. You saved my life. That creates a bond, whether we want it to or not. And frankly, I like you. Both of you. He smiled at Sarah. I'd like to get to know you better. No pressure, no obligations. Just dinner between friends. Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. Finally, Sarah smiled. We'd like that. After Ashford left, Sarah turned to Marcus with wide eyes. What just happened? I have no idea, Marcus admitted. But something had shifted. Some door had opened that Marcus hadn't even known existed. The dinner happened 2 weeks later. Ashford invited them to a restaurant in the city, about an hour's drive from the farm. Marcus had never been to a place this nice. The maitre d' greeted them by name, led them to a private table in the back. The menu didn't have prices on it, which Marcus had only ever seen in movies. But Ashford was the same as he'd been at their farmhouse, warm, genuine, interested. He asked Sarah about her pregnancy, laughed at her stories about the ridiculous advice people kept giving her. He asked Marcus about the farm, about the challenges of agriculture, about his abandoned engineering dreams. Over dessert, some complicated thing with chocolate and gold leaf that Marcus was afraid to eat. Ashford leaned back in his chair. I have a confession to make, he said. This isn't just a social dinner. I have a proposition for you, Marcus. Marcus set down his fork. A proposition? I've been thinking about what you told me, about wanting to be an engineer. And I've been watching how you handle things. How you spent the money I gave you. How you manage your farm. How you treat your wife. Ashford paused. You're smart, Marcus. Responsible. Honest. Those are rare qualities, especially in combination. Thank you, Marcus said slowly, not sure where this was going. Ashford Industries is expanding, Ashford continued. We're breaking ground on a new development project here in Millbrook County, mixed-use residential and commercial. It's a 3-year project, minimum. We need someone to oversee it. Someone local who understands the community. Someone I can trust. Marcus felt Sarah's hand find his under the table. I'm offering you a job, Marcus. Project manager. You'd work under my chief engineer, a man named Harold Chen, actually, no relation. He'd train you, teach you everything you need to know. The pay is $85,000 a year to start, with full benefits. Health insurance, dental, retirement contributions. Everything.
The number hit Marcus like a physical blow. $85,000. More than twice what he'd made in his best year farming. Marcus couldn't find words. Mr. Ashford, I appreciate this, but I don't have the qualifications. I never finished my degree. I don't have any experience in construction or project management. You have something better than credentials, Ashford said. You have character.
And intelligence.
And work ethic. The technical skills can be taught. The other qualities can't be.
He leaned forward.
I'm not offering you charity, Marcus. I'm offering you a job.
A real job.
One I think you'd be very good at. And if I'm wrong, if it doesn't work out, we part ways professionally. No hard feelings.
Why?
Sarah asked quietly. Why are you doing this? Ashford looked at her, and his expression was completely sincere. Because 6 weeks ago, your husband gave me my life back.
He didn't have to. He didn't know who I was.
He just saw another human being who needed help, and he helped. That kind of person, that kind of fundamental decency, is worth investing in.
He paused.
And because I built my company on the belief that talent exists everywhere, but opportunity doesn't. I'm offering Marcus an opportunity. What he does with it is up to him.
The shocking twist.
They drove home in silence, both of them processing. It wasn't until they were back at the farmhouse, sitting in the living room with mugs of tea, that Sarah spoke.
You want to do it, she said.
It wasn't a question. I want to do it, Marcus admitted.
But I'm terrified.
What if I fail?
What if I'm not good enough? This could be our way out, Sarah. Real stability.
Health insurance for you and the baby. But if I screw it up?
You won't screw it up, Sarah said firmly.
Marcus, I've watched you keep this farm running on practically nothing for 5 years. I've watched you fix things you've never fixed before, learn things you've never done before, just because they needed doing. You're one of the smartest, most capable people I know. If Richard Ashford thinks you can do this, then you can do this. Marcus looked at his wife, her face glowing with conviction and trust, and felt something settle inside him.
Okay, he said. Okay. I'll do it.
What neither of them knew, what they couldn't have known, was that in Richard Ashford's study, the man himself was on the phone with his daughter Victoria. He's going to accept, Richard said confidently. You sound very sure of that, Victoria replied.
I am.
And when he does, I need you to do something for me.
What?
I need you to run a complete background check. Not just on Marcus, on everyone connected to him. His wife, her family, his late parents, everyone who might have a claim on him or influence over him. Dad, Victoria said slowly, what are you really doing here? Richard was quiet for a moment. Do you remember what I told you when I woke up in the hospital? About what I saw during those minutes when I thought I was dying. You said you saw Mom.
I did. And she told me something.
She said I'd spent so long building an empire that I'd forgotten how to build a legacy. Buildings and businesses aren't legacies, Victoria.
People are.
And Marcus Chen, that young man is going to be part of mine. You're planning something bigger than just a job offer, Victoria said.
Much bigger, Richard agreed.
But first, I need to know everything.
Every detail. Every potential problem.
Because what I'm about to do will change his life completely. And I need to make sure he's ready for it. What if he's not? Then I'll make him ready, Richard said simply. I didn't survive that crash by accident, Victoria. I survived because someone decent and good was in exactly the right place at exactly the right time.
That's not coincidence. That's fate.
And I don't ignore fate. After he hung up, Richard stood at his window, looking out over the city he'd helped build. Somewhere out there, Marcus Chen was making the decision that would set everything in motion. And Richard Ashford was going to make sure that decision changed not just one man's life, but an entire community's future. The game was just beginning. Marcus called Richard Ashford the next morning and accepted the job. I'm glad, Ashford said warmly.
Very glad. Can you start in 2 weeks?
That gives you time to arrange things with the farm, be there when the baby comes. 2 weeks is perfect, Marcus said, and realized he was smiling. After he hung up, he looked around the farmhouse. His grandfather's house.
His father's house. His house.
He'd always thought he'd die here, worn down by the endless work and the slim margins and the weight of family obligation. Now he was leaving. Not forever, he'd still own the farm, could lease the land to someone else. But he was leaving the life he'd always known for something completely unknown.
It was terrifying. It was exhilarating.
Sarah came up behind him, wrapping her arms around him as much as her belly would allow. "You okay?"
"I'm okay," Marcus said.
"More than okay." 3 days later, Sarah went into labor. It was fast. Much faster than the books said it would be for a first baby. Marcus barely got her to the hospital in time. And then there he was, their son, screaming and red and absolutely perfect. They named him James, after Sarah's father. Marcus held his son in his arms and thought about the chain of events that had brought him to this moment.
A storm. A car crash.
A split-second decision to run toward danger instead of away from it.
One choice.
One moment of basic human decency. And everything had changed. He had no idea how much more it was about to change. Because in the hospital cafeteria, making a call while Marcus and Sarah bonded with their newborn son, Richard Ashford was putting the next phase of his plan into motion.
"Harold?"
"It's Richard. The project manager position we discussed, Marcus Chen accepted. I need you to fast-track his training. Get him up to speed as quickly as possible."
"How quickly?" Harold asked. 6 months. Maybe less."
"Richard, that's not enough time to properly train someone with no experience for a project this size."
"It'll have to be," Richard said.
"Because in 6 months, I'm going to offer him something bigger. Something that's going to make this whole county sit up and take notice." "What are you planning?"
"You'll see," Richard said.
"Everyone will see. Marcus Chun saved my life. Now I'm going to save his. And in the process, I'm going to prove something I've believed my whole life, that worth isn't determined by where you come from. It's determined by who you are." He hung up and headed back upstairs to congratulate the new parents. The pieces were moving into place. The story was accelerating. And Marcus Chun, good, decent, honest Marcus Chun, was about to discover that his simple act of kindness had consequences far bigger than he'd ever imagined. Marcus was in the construction trailer reviewing blueprints when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize, and the voice on the other end said, "Mr. Chun, this is Patricia Morrison from First National Bank. I'm calling about the $2 million that was just deposited into your account this morning, and we need to verify that you authorized this transaction." The first 3 months of Marcus's new job passed in a blur of learning, exhaustion, and exhilaration. Harold Chun, no relation, but they joked about being work brothers, turned out to be an excellent teacher. He was a Chinese-American man in his 50s who'd worked his way up from construction worker to chief engineer over 30 years. He understood what it was like to start with nothing, to have to prove yourself twice as hard as everyone else. "You've got good instincts," Harold told Marcus during their second week. They were standing at the construction site, 20 acres of former farmland that would become the Ashford Millbrook Commons, a mixed-use development with residential units, commercial spaces, and a
community center.
You see problems before they become disasters. That's rare, especially for someone new to this. Marcus soaked up everything like a sponge. He learned to read blueprints, to coordinate with subcontractors, to spot structural issues before they became catastrophic. He learned building codes and zoning regulations, material costs and labor scheduling. He worked 12-hour days, came home exhausted, spent an hour with Sarah and baby James, then studied technical manuals until he fell asleep. Sarah never complained. The $85,000 salary had transformed their lives. They'd moved into a small rental house in town, still modest, but with working heat, reliable plumbing, and a yard where James could play as he grew. They had health insurance. They had savings. They had stability. "You're different," Sarah told him one night as they lay in bed, James asleep in his crib nearby.
"Happy.
Like there was this part of you that was always buried under worry, and now it's finally free."
She was right.
Marcus had always carried the weight of the farm like a stone around his neck, the history, the obligation, the constant fear of failure. Now, for the first time in his adult life, he was doing work he was good at, work that challenged him, work that felt like building toward something instead of just surviving. The farm was leased now to a young couple who were making a go of organic vegetables. Marcus still owned the land, but he'd let go of the day-to-day burden. And the relief of that release was profound. Richard Ashford visited the construction site regularly. Not to micromanage. He trusted Harold and, increasingly, Marcus to handle the details. But he liked to see the progress, to talk with the workers, to make sure the project was proceeding according to his vision. "This isn't just about buildings," he told Marcus one day as they stood watching a crew pour the foundation for the residential tower. "It's about creating community. These apartments will house families. The commercial spaces will house small businesses. The community center will be a place for people to gather, to connect. We're not just constructing structures, we're constructing possibilities." Marcus had never thought about construction that way before. But listening to Ashford, he began to see it. Every decision they made, where to place windows, how to design common spaces, which local businesses to recruit as tenants, would affect real people's lives for decades.
It was humbling.
And inspiring. By month 4, Harold was letting Marcus make significant decisions independently. By month 5, Marcus was running crew meetings, solving problems, catching mistakes before they cost time and money. "You're a natural," Harold told him. "I've trained a lot of project managers over the years. You're in the top 5%, easily. Maybe higher." Marcus tried not to let the praise go to his head.
But it felt good.
It felt like he'd finally found the thing he was meant to do. And then, on a cold morning in February, 6 months almost to the day since he'd started, everything changed again. Marcus was in the construction trailer, reviewing supply orders when his phone rang.
Unknown number.
He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up.
"Mr. Chen?"
"This is Patricia Morrison from First National Bank."
"Yes.
"I'm calling about a large deposit that was made to your account this morning. Standard protocol for amounts over a certain threshold, we need to verify that you authorized the transaction."
Marcus frowned.
"I didn't authorize any deposits. What amount are we talking about?"
There was a pause.
$2 million, Mr. Chen." The phone nearly slipped from Marcus's hand. "I'm sorry, did you say 2 million?
"Yes, sir."
The transfer came from Ashford Holdings, LLC. The memo line says, Partnership Investment. "Do you know anything about this?"
"No. No, there must be some mistake."
I'll call Mr. Ashford and sort this out. Don't do anything with that money." Marcus hung up and immediately dialed Richard Ashford's private number, the one Ashford had given him with instructions to use it whenever needed. Ashford answered on the second ring.
"Marcus.
I was expecting your call."